an inch. We also adjust the tabletop itself to make the correct depth of cut, and then we take a piece of scrap like I did here and make a couple of test cuts. In this case, the first test I made was I went too deep in the wood, and fortunately I did make the test cut rather than go ahead and cut on my stock. I made another test cut over here after adjusting the tabletop, and that gave us a perfect cut. Just exactly 3/8 of an inch deep is what we wanted. The next thing I do, in order to make sure that I'm going to fit, give a little test on the stock I'm going to use, and I see I've got it just right there. So now I'm ready to make the cut. I've got my saw exactly set up right. I've got the rip fence set up over here, and that will give me the exact length, or rather the spacing, from the end of the stock to where I want the dado cut. And I can make repetitive cuts on that. It's very simple, and I've got no problem. Put down my little lock so I get a good grip here. Make sure I'm lined up on the miter gauge. I'm ready to make this cut. I'm going to push this nice and slow through here because I want to minimize tear out on the bottom. That's going to be a beautiful cut. Now that we've got our dado cuts made, we're ready to start on our adjustable shelves. And we need to drill a series of holes on the opposing sides, just like this, so that the shelves will sit in here and be absolutely level. We're going to drill both sides alike, and the way to do that is we've made this simple little jig. It's going to be locate these holes for us exactly 2 inches from the edge of the side, and the holes will be 2 inches apart. Slips on here just like this. I've already drilled one hole, and look how this, just like magic, put that little peg in there and that locks the jig down completely. I've set my depth gauge already on a brad point bit so that when this protrudes through the jig, it will be just enough to hold these shelf brackets. Now we're ready to go. And look at how magic this works. Could anything be easier? This doesn't hurt the jig at all. You can use this jig time after time. Simply hold it down here with your thumb. These holes are going to be precisely located. And I'll be able to do this time after time, part after part, so that the entire cabinet is perfectly lined up. Look how easy that was. A bracket fits right in there like that.
We've got all of our plywood pieces cut, our dados, the holes drilled for the adjustable shelves. So now what we're doing is we're working in a flat, wide area, and we're dry fitting the pieces to make sure that they all go together well, and everything looks great. So what I'm doing now is using this framing square, is I'm drawing a line on the back side of every dado joint, so when we come around with our finish nails, we know we're not going to puncture into the inside of our shelves. We want to go right into the middle of that joint.
That's a heartbreaking mistake to make, and I hate to tell you how many times I've done it myself.
I tell you.
We need to take this apart a little bit because we can't put the outside together first. We have to put this together from the inside out, so that's where we'll start now.
Have a bottle of glue.
Thank you.
Well, that does it on nailing our unit together. One thing I want to say, though, is when you're doing your nailing here on a bookcase or any other kind of cabinet, be very careful not to dent the sides of your unit, as you don't want those to show up as scars. If you do happen to leave a couple dents, what you can do is take a steam iron and a damp rag and lay that damp rag across the dent, and the damp rag will actually raise that dent back out. What I usually do is I'll leave the finish nail protruding slightly above the surface of the wood. Then once everything is dry, I'll go back and set the nails using a nail set. Okay, why don't we check it for square?
Good idea. We're going to measure from corner to corner diagonally, and if the measure on both sides is the same, then we know we've got a completely square cabinet. This is 85 3/8 on this side.
Got it.
And it's 85 3/8 here, so we're perfectly square.
Wonderful.
Now,
Looks great.
In order to hold that perfectly square, what we need to do is nail a batten across here, and that will, as we move the bookcase around, That'll keep it in square for us. We're also going to add a few clamps.
Just nail your nails in so they're sticking up and they'll be able to come out nice and easy later on.
That's a good idea.
Okay, how about a clamp?
Great idea.
Now, one thing I want to recommend is when you're using clamps, to put a piece of scrap wood between the jaw of the clamp and the side of your cabinet so you don't mar it.
Hey, this is really beginning to look like a bookcase. I can't wait to get it up to the living room.
I know, it's going to look nice. Well, now that we've got it glued and clamped together, the next thing we want to do is create our face frame. Now, the face frame will go around the perimeter of the unit like that. And then we'll be putting these solid oak shelf strips like so. And these shelf strips you can create yourself, or you can buy them already rounded like that. So now we're going to go to Les, who's going to show you how to rip the stock.
We're ready to cut our face frame pieces. This is some of the material we got at the lumberyard. It's almost ready to go, but we have one thing that's very important. In building our face frame, we need the edges of the lumber to be absolutely straight and absolutely parallel. When you get stuff from the lumberyard, it looks almost like that, but it's never quite right. So in looking this piece over, I can see that we have a slight cup on this edge, and we've got a slight belly down here, and we're going to have to remove that on the jointer. That's pretty simple to do. The jointer attachment will let us do that very quickly. In here is a cutter head that revolves very quickly, and as I pass the lumber over the two tables, it's going to shave a very small amount of lumber off here and leave me with a very, very straight edge. I may have to pass this over a couple of times to get all that cup out of there. We'll check as we go. I'm going to hold the board right up against this fence so that I have a nice 90-degree angle right down here. Okay, we're ready to go. Okay, we got lucky that time and got a nice straight edge there the first time. Now what I'll do, in order to get my 3-inch piece for the bottom of the bookcase, I've got the table saw set up here at exactly 3 inches from between the blade and the fence. I've got my featherboard in place. Crank that down a little bit more. And we're ready to make our cut.
In creating our face frame, we want to strengthen all 4 joints by using these 2 dowels at each joint. I'll show you how that works. This vertical piece is called the stile, and the horizontal is called the rail. And half of each dowel goes into each piece. So these pieces will go together like that. It's very easy to do. I'll show you how to do it. I already laid out the face frame, and I made my marks right here. I measured 1 inch from the top at each point, and I made a number there so I don't get my joints mixed up. Okay, so to create the dowel hole, I'm going to clamp this piece in here. Using this dowel jig, what I do is I line up the mark on the dowel jig with the mark that I made on my wood and tighten it down. Okay, and this dowel jig is set up so I'll be able to drill both holes and they'll line up perfectly. Okay, ready to drill. Okay, now I want to stop here and just show you this tape. This acts as a depth gauge so that I know that I'm just drilling in slightly more than half the length of this dowel. Great. Drill my second hole. Okay, then I'll drill the dowel holes on the other side.
Drilling the dowel holes in our face frame is fun, and this horizontal boring jig makes it a lot easier for us. Let me show you what we have to do first. Our plans tell us where the dowel holes go and how deep they should be, but it's up to us to make the layout line and set the machine up. Now look at here, we've set out our marks very, very carefully, because these have to match up. We're going to use this miter gauge to make sure that our piece of face frame stays exactly on the same line as our brad point bit that we've set up in here. And now I'm going to set the depth. In order to do that, I'm going to bring the brad point bit right up so it rests against my face frame, lock the quill down for just a second, and come over here to my depth gauge, and I want this to be exactly 1 1/16 inch in there. That's a little over half the length of the dowel pin itself. I'll lock that down so I've got my 1 1/16 and release the quill. Now just to make sure I did that right, a little double check, let's pull that up here and see. Yes, sirree, just 1 1/16 exactly. Now we're ready to make that cut.